Coming up, from accounting to the fashion industry.
We're making the dresses for all the stars that go to the Academy Awards, like Halle Berry, her dress, we made that.
To discovering a greater purpose.
So I looked at John and I said, I got something to tell you. And out comes this long word. He's looking at me and his eyes are getting all big and he's like, you have no idea what you've done.
Hubie Synn shares how stepping out in our spiritual gifts can impact the lives of others. The conversation starts now. Real friends, loving, laughing, and learning together. Sharing stories, one life at a time. So grab a seat. Welcome to Joni Table Talk. Well, oftentimes the gifts of the Holy Spirit draw us out of our comfort zones. But as you'll hear today, by being obedient with your gift, He will lead you into places you've never even dreamed. Joining me around the table is no one better to talk about this subject than John Paul Jackson. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I get to sit on this side of the table.
You're on this side of the table. This is very strange, for sure. But thank you for being here today.
I'm thrilled to be here.
And we're excited about your show on
Yes,
Daystar.
yes, Dreams and Mysteries.
And it airs on
Thursday nights at 9:30 and Wednesday afternoons at 3 o'clock.
Okay. Well, Rebecca Lamb, welcome.
Thank you.
And this is something you're all about, what we're talking about today.
I am all about this.
And you love sitting next to John Paul and your sister.
I mean, two great people to be sandwiched in between.
I love that. Rachel Lamb, how are you?
I'm good.
All
Glad
right.
to be here.
Appreciate you being here. You've been a little under the weather, but you're still here. I'm glad.
Fighting strong.
Cindy Murdoch, my friend for over 30 years because we became friends when we were 2. But it's so good that you're here today.
Thank you. I love being here.
And
Thank you. This
Hubie
is a joy.
Synn, welcome.
Thank you.
What
Thank
a
you for having
blessing
me.
to have you here today.
It's a blessing to be here. Thank you.
Now, right before we talk to you, Hubie, I want to just go to you first. John Paul, you're going to relate to a lot of the things we're going to talk
already,
about
yeah.
with him, and that's why I wanted you to be on there. But for people who have a prophetic gifting, there are some signs early on, even as children, don't you think, teenagers?
Yeah, there's signs early on. Sometimes you pay attention to them, sometimes you don't pay attention to them, but God always gets our attention at the time where we're supposed to start putting them to use. Lots of times that's through a crisis.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened to you. You had a crisis.
Yes.
More than one, probably.
Actually, quite a few. Quite a few.
You know, part of your story is that you had some rebellion in your life, and so I want you to tell that, but take us back to growing up and how you first come to know the Lord.
Well, I was born in Waco, and my parents...
So you're a true Texan.
I'm a true Texan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's great to be home, by the way.
See, he was born in Waco. I was born in Waxahachie, and they're not like only like 45 miles away from each
Oh,
other.
that is interesting.
And they're both W's.
Yeah, that's right.
And life was kind of hard growing up because, you know, my sister and I didn't look alike. So it was, we got made fun of a lot, and people, you know, because my sister was more white complexioned than I was. So growing up was kind of hard because people made fun of us all the time, and they said, oh, there's something going on in that house and stuff like that. And that kind of built up anger in my life.
And what is your heritage for people who don't know?
I'm Korean, Mexican, and American Indian.
Okay. Wow, 3 very important people
Yes.
groups.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, my dad used to open up restaurants, so we would move around here. We moved to Cahn, and then we were there for a little while, and then we moved to St. Louis. And so we were there for probably during most of my high school years, and then we moved to New York. And when we moved to New York, a lot of things started to fall apart. I didn't grow up with a regular family. It was pretty dysfunctional. And once we got to New York, my parents decided that they were going to split. So they split, and you know, I'm there, I am rebelling, I'm hanging out with the wrong crowd. And I got really angry that my parents were splitting up, because you think if your parents are together, that's really the way it should be, but you know, my parents didn't get along at all. So I went through my rebellious stage, and then as time went on, I graduated college, and then I met my wife during college, and we got married.
So there was no really understanding of God in your life or church or anything like that at that point?
Well, my mother used to drag us to church, but then I had no idea really what this was. So being that my life was just so rough, I was just like, well, okay, well, there's a Bible there, and I'm opening it up, and it doesn't really mean anything to me. I would read it, wouldn't understand it. I mean, I started reading Revelations thinking, and that was like the worst thing I could do. I started reading that first.
Really? Don't ever start in Revelation. Never start in Revelation.
I tried to just skim and do the ending, but it didn't work. So I was going through that, and I just remember my mother used to drag us to church all the time, and we used to just go just because we had to go. Yeah. So I didn't really understand anything about God. And then, you know, my wife and I, we got married, and we're just kind of living life like, you know, like a normal person would. And, you know, we went to the supermarket. I bought one of these beaded seat covers that the cabbies wear because it keeps you cool during the winter time, and it's very slippery. And, you know, we leave the place, we're going down the block, and my wife is like, and I'm like, are you okay? She's like, I'm fine. And I'm like, I must have did something wrong here, so now I'm trying to see what did I did to annoy her. I go, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. Why are you asking? I said, are you mad at me? She's like, no. I go, so why are you kind of giving me like this attitude? I don't know, I just don't feel well. So then I noticed she wasn't wearing her seatbelt. My wife, the seatbelt always has to go on, and I never really wore it. So I said, why aren't you wearing your seatbelt? And she's like, I don't really want to wear it. So like, she's getting more and more annoyed. I said, I better stop. I just kind of... So as we're driving along, all of a sudden we heard this bang. And I look and I see the windshield cracking. And I don't really know what happened. I just know something jolted us. And as it hit, I got moved over to the gear shift. My legs kind of buckled, but I just slid right over. And then I saw her window started to crack. So I grabbed her, because she wasn't in her seatbelt, and I pulled her down and I leaned over it. And the glass from her window went across the car and took out my window. Wow. So we didn't really know what was going on. You know, I get up and we get out of the car, and we were on a 2-lane street. So apparently a guy, he was at the stop sign, and as we're going along, he decided that he was going to press on the accelerator because he had a problem with his girlfriend. He didn't see us, and he literally just hit the car and moved us over in the other lane. So there was no car coming this way, because that would have been a problem. If my wife would have been wearing her seatbelt, she would have been really bad with the glass. If I didn't buy the beaded seat cover, I wouldn't have been able to slide over and pull her down. So it could have gotten really bad for us. So I remember sitting in the ambulance like, you know, we should have died. So I went to the hospital, and they checked us out, and both of us are wearing neck braces. And it was kind of funny now that we look back at it. It wasn't funny at the time. You know, I remember taking a walk around the block, because I had to try to do it with my knees because they were kind of hurt. And she would look one way, and I would look the other. We both got our neck braces.
You look that way, I look this way.
Exactly. It was kind of pathetic, but it was pretty funny. So that kind of got us thinking. So I started church shopping at that point. I went to
a little hole for a God awakening happened in your heart.
Yeah.
Yes. Because when you know, like, we got out of the car, we should have died. And we're sitting in the ambulance, and we're like, you know, we should really kind of figure out something, because she grew up in church also, but we just weren't really following it. So then we're like, okay, we need to kind of figure out something. So I started going. I went to a Presbyterian church. I went to the Catholic church, and nothing really seemed to kind of feel right. So we went to a Methodist church, which was down the block, and it was there that we kind of met a lot of people. So we stayed and hung out there for a little while. You know, we're just going to church and coming home, and that was a nice hour on Sunday. Then we'll go out to eat. And then as time went on, it kind of felt like there was something more. So my wife was at work one day, and she had a very rough day. She went in the bathroom, and she slammed the door. And she's like, Jesus, help me. And then there's a lady in the next stall that opens up and peeks her head out and said, oh, you're saved? So that woman invited her to church. And then we started going to a church in Manhattan, and that kind of got our walk really moving at that point.
And so what kind of church was this church?
It was a full gospel church. It was made up of Broadway stars and actors and actresses and models. So literally when you walked in, you never know who you were going to see. Like, I remember seeing Donna Summer there once. I remember seeing Roberta Flack and a model named Coco Mitchell at that time. So there were a lot of people just... everybody was running to this place.
So you're in your career at this time, you're an accountant, and you start to feel really burned out. What happened?
I was doing accounting for so long, and tax season is a very rough thing from January through May.
I just can't imagine being an accountant. I have to tell you.
I know,
that
right?
is like, oh my goodness.
Months of vacation.
In my nightmares.
I mean, literally, you can't sleep or anything. It gets to you. And after doing it for so long, I had a successful practice in Manhattan. I had workers with me, and I was just so burnt out that I had a client that he started to do fashion stuff. And he started to be successful. We started working with the fancy designers. And he's like, I can't take this anymore. You know, this business stuff I design, that's what I do. I hate looking at numbers. And, you know, it seems every decision we're making, they're consulting me. God kind of made them the right choices. So I don't really take credit for that. So he's like, you know what, why don't you come join me? And I was like, okay, don't ask me twice. That's a dream job. I'll do that. So I jumped.
The fashion industry from an accountant. That is a quantum leap.
I know.
So we're designing pillows. We're making the dresses for all the stars that go to the Academy Awards. Like Halle Berry, her dress, we made that. And it was living the high life. It was meeting a lot of people. It was dining. It was, you know, you want to feel important. That's how you feel important. And it was fun. But during that time, because I was spending so much time at work because I really wanted this job and I always wanted to accomplish this and I loved it, then my marriage started to get rough because I was never home.
Yeah. Your kids suffered as a result as well.
My son started failing, which is, as a parent, that really means I took that very seriously. So I tried, the first thing is, okay, fax me your homework and we'll go in a conference room and we'll go conference call.
Wow.
I mean, that's not really right. And then after that, I was at work on a Saturday, and the Lord was like, okay, well, your time for this went like this. My time like this went like this. Get your priorities straight. And I went, oh. So I was like, okay, I got a choice. I can live the life I'm living. I can buy anything I want, and I'm very successful. Or I can just do what I need to do to get everything fixed. So I came home, and the Lord's like, you need to quit. And I went, okay. I walked through the door. I tell my wife, I need to quit. And she goes, yes, you do. And all the time driving home, I'm like, oh my gosh, how you want to tell me?
Concerned how she would respond, yeah.
Income falls drastically at that. And it wasn't like I never had another job offer. I just decided that I was going to walk away from it.
Wow.
And the Lord actually blessed that decision immediately.
Well, I didn't make business cards for a year, and a lot of clients started coming back. Wow. And during that time was when I met David Tyree's financial person, and he put me in contact with him. And God,
all right, don't get ahead of the story.
Okay.
That's coming up next. You're going to love hearing this story. Stay right where you are. We'll be right back with Hubie Synn. Well, when we are obedient with our gifts, lives are changed. But often it can be an intimidating experience. For Hubie Synn, it would prove to be a blessing in the lives of so many people, but it's always a challenge. Now, help us understand that, Copy, in that as you were introduced into kind of the prophetic world, if you will, there were some things that happened that, you know, could have diverted you. Just kind of go back to kind of the first time the Lord used you, maybe.
Okay, it was September 10th, 2001. We landed in Sweden right when 9/11 was happening here.
Right.
On that trip, I remember I was praying for a woman, and all of a sudden, as I'm praying for her, it's like something kind of came over me and kind of just came out. And after we finished praying, she looked at me with tears in her eyes, and she's like, oh, how did you know? And that's exactly what I really needed prayer for, and I have no idea what's going on. I'm like, okay.
Right.
And that was kind of the first glimpse that I've had. You had mentioned glimpses. That was kind of like my first glimpse.
Okay, so let's jump to you real quick, because there are people watching and saying, wait, he just said this, something came over him. Make that easy for us to understand what happened.
Well, the Holy Spirit, when it comes upon you, the prophets of old would say, the Holy Spirit came upon me, or the Spirit of God came upon me, the Spirit of God lifted me up, the Spirit of God awoke me, the Spirit of God said to me. And that's what that would be their way of saying what you just said.
Okay.
Yeah, something happened to you.
Okay, so that happened, and you were amazed that God used you in that way to encourage this woman. And then what happened right after that? Because this is important for those of you that are listening today, because some of you have been discouraged from the gifting that God has placed. within you, and you've actually shut the door on some things, and God is saying, I want you to hear this today because I want to open that door back up, and I want to use you in supernatural ways, not necessarily prophetic, maybe so, but other ways as well. But because, you know, you were deterred, you've gotten off course, and this is what happened with you. Tell us what happened.
Yes. It was probably about a year or two later that my wife became pregnant. Actually, no, it was the next year. My wife became pregnant. She was about 2 months, and you know, we had gotten a word that, you know, your child, actually in church we had gotten a word that this child is gonna be blessed, it's gonna be this, it's called to do this, it's all been ordained. And we came home, and when we came home, she goes, honey, I don't feel well, I feel like I got cramps. And then she started to spot. Now we've had 3 pregnancies up at that point, there's never been an issue. So I'm sitting there thinking, you'll be okay, just lie down. And she goes, I really got a bad feeling. I'm like, don't worry about it, we're fine. Don't get scared, you know, start praying against fear because can't let that creep in. And about an hour later, we lost the baby.
Wow.
And that was a pretty hard-hitting thing for me.
Right.
That I was just like, wait a minute, I don't understand.
Yeah.
I just got this prophetic word about this baby.
It's ordained.
It's ordained and everything, and we just lost the child.
So what would you, had you been there, John Paul, and this happened to Hubie, and he asked you that question, what would you say to him to encourage him?
I said the enemy is trying to steal your gift away from you. He's using this moment to discourage you from the gift that he has already given you and you've utilized, and doesn't want it to go any further. It's like the enemy is saying, this is enough, stop it right now. And so he uses a prophetic word to set you up emotionally and then boom, bring you down to the pit, as emotionally as low as you can go.
Right. And really, there was about 6 months that I walked that somebody pulled the rug out from me. We didn't go to church anymore because I said there's really something wrong here, because we kind of went and pulled out some old ones that we had, and we're kind of like, oh, maybe they're not exactly what they're going to say. So we kind of just washed our hands of all of this because I didn't understand it and I was confused.
Right.
And then one time a woman named Leisha Epperson called me, and we were talking because she had gone through many miscarriages. And she goes, well, you know, God gets the glory and all this. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to hear that, I don't want to hear that. And she goes, you know, you lost a child. Now you know what God felt like.
Wow.
And I was like, oh man, yeah. It's
Wow.
you know, because you say he sent his son and he died on the cross, and you kind of take it, okay, yes,
Yeah.
but then you don't realize, yeah, that's really what it took.
Yeah.
And you know, we slowly started to come out of it, and God kind of started moving us along into a church. Then after that, probably about a year, we stayed home.
But slowly God began to work on your heart and pulled you back in to the fold, and God started using you again in prophetically, where you're talking about where the Spirit of the Lord would come upon you. And there were some very significant things that happened. And of course, Jonathan Cahn, we can talk about him, or we can talk about the football player. Which one?
David Tyree.
Yeah, David Tyree.
He was injured. He was having the worst time of his life as far as a professional, as far as working. And, you know, a football player, they want to get back on the field, and he had hurt his wrist and he couldn't get on. So, and he was having a very bad season as it was. I called him up.
Wait, you were his CPA?
Oh, I became his CPA through his financial advisor after I had kind of walked away from the fashion company. And, you know, I called him up one night after the Lord really nudging me and praying for him. The Lord said, you know, you really need to call him. So I got his name and number off of the Rolodex, and I called him up, and I said, Dave, and he's like, yeah. I go, it's Hubie. He's like, who? I said, oh, the accountant. He's like, oh, yeah, how you doing? I said, I got something to tell you. He's like, okay, shoot. So, and then out comes this really long word.
And kind of tell us a little bit about what it was the Lord said to him.
The word said that he was going to put him on a platform because he wanted to really share the gospel of Jesus to everybody. The Lord told him he would be known as a wide receiver. He was a special teams guy that everybody knew him as. The Lord said he was going to take him out of obscurity and put him in the spotlight. David could walk down the street and nobody knew who he was. I said, Dave, are you there? And I'm scared to death. Like, oh my goodness, what did I just do? He says, I don't know what to say. Now that's like, oh no, it's got bad intentions all over. He said, I was just speaking to my wife and everything I was telling my wife, and because it was okay that he was a football player, but he really wanted the spotlight to share the Lord and stuff. So everything that he was kind of speaking to his wife about, he got answers for.
Wow.
And he was like, I got to get to know you a little better. So I was like, okay.
Wow.
So that kind of formed our friendship from that point
So were
on.
you even surprised the night of the Super Bowl? What year was this? 2008?
Yeah, 8. Yeah.
So 8.
Was it 2008?
Which was about 5 months after I had spoken to him.
Okay. So were you watching that night?
We were watching the whole day. My wife and I were...
I was watching. I can tell you blow by blow here.
The day of, my wife and I, we felt like something was really burning inside of our chests. Like, this was this whole thing. And we didn't really know what it was. I've never experienced that before. So we're watching TV, and David caught a touchdown. I think it was just after the half. And we're like, no, that's not it. There's something else. You know, he's happy, caught a touchdown.
Yeah.
The day before in the practice, when he was practicing, he dropped every single ball in practice. Wow. And he was just having a horrendous season. Wow. And, you know, he caught it, and we're like, yes, okay, he caught it. It's like, no, that's not it. There's something else. Then as time wound down, it was 3rd down.
To the very end of the game.
The very end of the game, that if they didn't make this 1st down, the game would be over. Eli almost gets sacked. There were people grabbing at his jersey. And somehow he got out of it, and then he just saw David, and he just hoisted it up in the air. And David went up and came down with it. And then, you know, as it's going through the air, I'm telling my daughter, David's going to catch it, because she's a Giant fan. So, so David's going to... And then when he caught it, we just all jumped up in the living room like, that's it, that's it.
Okay, we have to tell quickly the story of our dear friend, Jonathan Cahn, because that's how we met you, is through Jonathan. And, of course, we know his book, The Harbinger, that stayed New York Times bestseller forever. Still at the top of the list. But he was virtually, no one knew Jonathan Cahn. No one knew about this book. No one knew what the Lord had shown him. And through a series of events, you two are sitting together at an airport in North Carolina. Tell us what happened.
Well, my sister got diagnosed with stomach cancer, and so I was rushing to come see her because we didn't have the greatest relationship. And as I booked my flight for Friday, and then Friday comes and there is this terrible nor'easter, windstorm, rainstorm, and my flight kept getting bumped. So the only flight that they had out was at 10 o'clock, and then I called them up and I said, okay, when is the connection to go to Dallas? And they said, there isn't one, Mr. Synn. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna fly there and sleep in the airport. Who wants to do that? So they booked me on the first flight the next morning. So I stayed up all night working. I'm really annoyed because I'm tired, I'm hungry. My time with my sister just got messed up. So I get on the plane and I arrive in North Carolina. And in North Carolina, I go get a cup of coffee and I go to this room. And of course, because of the weather, it's all packed. And there's 2 seats that are kind of near the window. So I go and sit down and got my headphones on, and I'm just trying to be by myself, and the Lord starts nudging me. So I look to the right and I see a Jewish-looking man. He's dressed in all black, he's got the beard, and the Lord's like, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me, you know? I mean, I'm having a rough day as it is, you gotta be kidding me.
Not now.
Not now, exactly. Don't you know how I feel? Like he doesn't, right? So then finally, it's just like I get really nauseous. And I'm like, okay. Put my coffee down, put my headphones away, I turn to him and I go, what's the good word? He goes, Jesus loves you. And I went, all right, I got something to work with here. Okay. So we started having small talk. He asked me what I do. I said, well, I'm an accountant. What do you do? Oh, I'm on the radio, but we didn't really, it's very standoffish. And then they call us. This goes on for a couple of minutes, and then it's time to get on for the flight. So as we're going, it's like, it's nice to meet you. And then the Lord's like, you need to do this now. All of a sudden, my stomach is really turning bad because I'm trying to ignore it. So I looked at Jonathan and I said, I got something to tell you. The Lord wants to tell you something. And he's like, okay. So he sits back down and out comes this long word. He's looking at me and his eyes are getting all big and he's like, you have no idea what you've done. I'm like, no, I don't. He goes, you know, because I'm panicking. I'm like, did I really mess up here? Because I don't know. He goes, when we go on that flight, I'm going to come find you. And I'm like, what? He's like, I'm going to come find you because you got to tell me everything again. And I'm like, it doesn't happen that way. I can't, it's not on demand. I don't have that. I don't even know what I said. It's just kind of happening. So he goes, it doesn't matter. I'll come find you. So we go up in the air. We sit down. He pulls a tray table, puts the thing, he turns. Okay, say it again. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I don't have anything. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, he goes, it's so important. It's for the country. It's life, death. And he's telling me all these things. I have no idea what I said. So I was like, I don't understand. It doesn't work that way. I've never done this before. He goes, well, let's pray. So we start praying in the airline. And, you know, you can kind of see the people next to us because we're praying in tongues. And they're kind of giving us these kind of weird looks. So, so then it starts to come out, and he writes it all down. And it was a really long one.
So tell us in a nutshell, because we're out of time.
Okay.
What did you say to Jonathan?
Basically, the Lord had given him a book. It's from God. It was going to change the nation. God was going to do some things in his personal life. God was going to do some things in his wife. I seem to remember that he was supposed to have another child, which he did. So there were how the word would spread, his life would change because of the book. And, you know, now you go back, it fit perfectly like
Fits perfectly.
Yes.
And you actually introduced him to Stephen
Strang, yes.
Yes, that is so amazing. We could go on another hour talking about all this, but of course we're out of time. I want to thank Hubie Synn for joining us at the table, as well as John Paul Jackson. And I want to encourage you today. I hope you've been encouraged that God has a gift on the inside of you that's wanting to come out. And I pray that today that just, I don't know, a seed has been planted, and that you will allow God to do everything that he wants to do. And whatever negativity or things that have happened in your past to cause you to close that door, that you will allow that door to be opened again. Again, we have prayer partners that are standing by if you need prayer today. And we'd love to hear from you as well. From our social media platform, Facebook, Twitter. Leave us a comment, and who knows, maybe we might read your comment right here at the table. Thank you again. Thank you, ladies, girls. Did you love all that?
Yes. It was amazing.
Did you love it, Cindy?
Yes.
I loved it.
Always.
And I know you loved it as well. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for today.
This has been a Daystar Television production.